It is Summerween week. This will be my first Summerween. Wow, I'm getting pumped. This will be my first Summerween. I'm really excited. I will leave linked down below the creators of this readathon. If you're watching this, I'm sure you already know who they are. But just in case, they will be linked down below. So we have Olivia and Gabby. This is a week-long readathon where people are encouraged to read mystery thrillers, spooky vibes, horrors, whatever they kind of classify as Halloween vibes in the summertime. That's very exciting. I don't typically read, like, literally at all. I do not typically read mystery thrillers, certainly don't read horrors, really. I want to kind of branch out a little bit, so here we are. Here we go. We have these books here. We have 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 books. I have 3 to fit the prompts and then 2 bonus books. First one we have here, so read a book with haunt in the title. So we have The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, a popular pick for this prompt. Okay, I haven't yet read this. I've previously read The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. Primarily, our main character's name is Eleanor, and it follows a group of 4 people. We have a doctor, we have Eleanor, we have Theodora, and we have Luke. And they're all going to stay in this eerily haunted house called Hill House, and the doctor kind of wants to examine and record the paranormal activity going on. It's supposed to be quite psychological. So that's The Haunting of Hill House. I'm very excited to read it. It's quite short. It's just under 200 pages. So this is my play on a slasher. What books are slasher books? I had no idea. So I was trying to do some research. Nothing really had my attention. Then I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna count this one as a slasher, and I think it's fine. So this is Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. Slasher, multiple people die. Works for me. So this will be my first Christie. For the prompt, a book with Halloween colors on the cover. Misery by, like I just said, Stephen King. Originally I was gonna say blue was the Halloween color because I feel like blue is the color of like death, you know what I mean? But there's red, so blood, you know? So that works, okay? We're going with Misery. This is about an author who's like this very famous author, and his #1 fan kidnaps him and is like basically torturing him to like rewrite the ending of his series because the big fan doesn't like the way that the book ended or wants it to continue or something like that. Very excited. I'm excited and I'm nervous. And then we have 2 bonus reads, okay? There are more prompts, but they're more like read a book in the dark, bake a cozy treat to go with your spooky read. So we'll be doing that as well. What book am I reading in the dark? I don't know. I'm kind of considering reading Inside in the Dark. I could just be in a dark mood, okay? I'm reading in a dark mood. Alrighty. The bonus books. I just couldn't. I don't know if I'm actually going to be able to read all 5 of these in a week, but I'm going to try. Okay, I'm going to try. I just really wanted to read one of these in particular, and then the other one, while I was browsing at Barnes & Noble, I saw this and I just couldn't leave it. I just couldn't leave it. I'd never heard of it before, so we'll start with that. And that is Dog Island by Philippe Claudel. This is translated from the French, and it's a very short work basically about this remote island where a few people live, and a group people are like standing on the beach or walking along the beach, and 3 bodies wash ashore. And this group of people decide instead to alert the authorities to bury these bodies and hide basically their death because they don't want media to come to their secluded quiet island or something like that. I'm excited to read this one. Again, I've never heard of it before. I just saw it sitting there like a beacon on the Barnes & Noble shelf. When the Reckoning Comes by LaTanya McQueen. It's also pretty short. I really love this cover. This is supposed to be about set in a small segregated town in the South following Mira, whose childhood best friend is getting married on a plantation. Mira is a Black woman who has some problems with the fact that there's a celebration going on this plantation. So she goes back to her hometown to, like, I don't know, go to this wedding, and it's maybe like the spirits of the departed slaves are really pissed off. That sounds so good. That sounds so good. So I'm really excited to read When the Reckoning Comes by LaTanya McQueen. That is my TBR. I will update you when I finish. So I finished Dog Island by Philippe Claudel, which is, again, translated from the French. This book was not at all what I was expecting going into it. I picked this up from the mystery thriller section. I don't know, I was expecting it to be more like fast-paced, very plot-focused. It's sold as I mentioned before, a group of people on this remote island find 3 dead bodies wash ashore on their beach, and instead of alerting the authorities, they hide the bodies because they don't want to attract attention to their island. They want to keep it serene and peaceful. I mean, all that's true, but I was expecting it to be more like a fast-paced, plot-focused. This book was a religious allegory, mostly. It was very fable-esque. There were a lot of Christian religious tones in here and symbolism. I thought that it was really interesting. I ended up giving it 4 stars, but we'll talk about it a little more. Yeah, so it's like a religious allegory that's very fable-esque, depicting the fall of man on this almost pseudo Garden of Eden, on this very remote island in this larger island chain of deserted islands called the Dog Islands. And we follow a few of the inhabitants of this island. None of them have a name. They all go by their titles, which they have in this society, like the priest, the teacher, the old woman, the doctor, and the mayor, and then others. Those are just a few examples, but those people in particular are the ones on the beach when the dead bodies wash ashore. And they do decide to hide the bodies because, again, they don't want to attract attention to their island because they're trying to build a resort on this island. They don't want to risk the building of this resort on their island so that, to help with tourism kind of a thing. It's about the greed of man. It's about greed. It's about how our constant striving for progress and needing more and wanting more is our ultimate downfall. Like, we are our ultimate downfall. We bring that upon ourselves in our greed. And it's interesting in here too because one of the characters in particular mentions that he's an atheist and he believes that no matter what anybody does on earth, good or bad, that they're all going to end up nowhere, basically. And our priest doesn't believe in God. He doesn't say he's an atheist, but he doesn't really believe in God. I'm going all over the place. It's interesting too because the church on this island is built either on or surrounding this church. It's right by this dilapidated old boat, which then calls to mind Noah's Ark, which is mentioned at the end, basically symbolizing that these people are fucked from the off. Basically, there's gonna be no way to save these people. And I think that in the beginning, I'm going all over the place. With the 3 men that wash ashore, again, I'm calling to mind that very fable-esque symbolism of like the number 3. That's in a lot of fairy tales. It's commonly used. And that brings to mind, you know, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And I feel like in the beginning, these people on this remote Garden of Eden-esque type place were given an opportunity here. We're given like an opportunity to make the right choice. They make the wrong choice. That ultimately brings upon themselves their own downfall. The teacher in here is, to me, like the Christ-like figure. He's described a lot of times as having golden curls on his head, you know, like Jesus Christ's, like the halo of Jesus Christ. He's the one that has good, he's like the only one that has good intentions, the only one that has pure intentions, and he's the one that ends up screwed, basically, by everyone. There is a character in here too, the young girl who is like the Virgin Mary type symbol. Now that part of the story is a little bit complicated because there's lots of manipulation going on there, and I don't want to spoil anything, but trigger warning for child abuse and underage sexual abuse, BT dubs. But so there's all of that, and the fact that this island is like, there's like a big volcano on this island, and it's constantly rumbling the walls, and it's making noises and moving things around, is like makes me think a couple of things. Volcanoes, when they, like, their magma destroys, like, nature is omnipotent basically, and no matter what these men, like the plottings and the thoughts and the actions of men are not larger than nature, kind of a thing. And the fact that these people don't believe in God and have kind of rejected God and made themselves larger than nature in their minds, it's like this volcano exists and is constantly making rumblings and movement to, you know, dispel that deluded thought. When a volcano ruptures, right, so it can destroy everything, but there's also regrowth that comes afterwards, and that's, you know, something that I was thinking while reading this. There's no sort of like regrowth positivity going on in this, but it makes me think that, you know, like nature and man are always, it's constantly rolling and moving and evolving, and there's constantly going to be death and rebirth, and with the rebirth, new opportunities to make better choices. Okay, the other thing, we have like a police officer that comes onto this island, basically like asking questions about things kind of going on, and he's an interesting character as well. The last point that I wanted to make, all about man acting as larger than God or larger than nature. You know, they think, all these people on this island, they think they're protected by their remoteness, basically, like no one can see what they're doing. God can't even see what they're doing because God doesn't exist. The police officer comes to this island because of the eye of God in the sky. Satellites, because of the satellites. They call the satellites the eye of God in the sky, right? Like this man-made thing is, man is larger than God. That's how he finds this island and figures out what went on, kind of a thing, and that's goes on from there. So that's really interesting. Also, the whole concept of the 3 men that wash ashore. The mayor mentions that these men that wash ashore don't have any paperwork, so they can't be tied to a location and tied to a larger group, right? They can't be tied to a country, so basically their spiritual like their bodies are a moot point because they're not tied to anything man-made, constructed, you know what I mean? Like borders. And so that's what helps them reason, like, okay, yeah, we can off these bodies and like nobody cares, no one has to say anything about it. So yeah, that was interesting. Again, another, the creations of man are larger than nature, basically. But again, the omnipotence of the volcano that at any moment could completely wipe all this shit out. So why this book wasn't a 5-star, I ended up giving it 4-star. In the beginning, I wasn't sure if it was going to be a 3 because it took a little bit for me to like get fully into it. But I ended up giving it 4 because I thought that it was really, the points that it was making were really, really interesting, and it was really actually pretty well done and really well written. I feel like there were lots of really big ideas in here that detracted from the subtlety of the allegory that was really the main focus. Like the 3 men that wash ashore were 3 black bodies, and they were from, okay, so these are spoilers, by the way. Like people were transferring bodies for like the making of money, like larger corporations and stuff like that. People offed all these people. 2 white men drowned a bunch of bodies, a bunch of black bodies, because their tobacco, like some tobacco thing that was going on. People were trying to, I don't know, corporations trying to make money more important than actual human bodies and human beings. But I thought, okay, so that's like a very large subject matter with like an incredible amount of weight behind it. And then the whole, like I said before, a child being raped by someone, like an 11-year-old girl being raped by someone, which then it's inferred that it's her father later, but nothing is really ever done about it. It's like these larger, large issues that show like the absolute worst of humanity. I don't know, it just felt like those incredibly, insanely large topics almost deserved more attention than what was given in this short allegorical work. That's Dog Island by Philippe Claudel. I'm really glad I picked this up. I really did like it. I finished. Did you like that entrance? Yeah. I finished The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. So my first two picks were about as literary as they come. I'm not complaining. I love it. That's the vibe. I love a little literary puzzle going on. I love analyzing shit. So that's what we're gonna do. Shirley Jackson is a genius. I'm gonna start though by saying, like, a personal enjoyment vibe level, this wasn't like my favorite book of all time, but the appreciation that I have for the intellect of this woman is like peak. It's like, it's out of frame. It's that high. I got a lot of appreciation. There are so many literary references in this. I don't know why I wasn't expecting that when I picked this up. I don't know. I was expecting more of like a traditional haunted house, eerie vibe story. And there are definitely eerie vibes to this, but it's not like a scary read. It's psychological. It's completely psychological. It's about this young woman. It's very reminiscent of, oh my gosh, Alice in Wonderland. Like very reminiscent. In the beginning too, there's like Eleanor and Theodora see a bunny, and I'm like, Alice in Wonderland. She's embarking on the next stage of her life, and growing out of youth and childhood is terrifying, and going into these next stages and going out into the world is psychologically excruciating, like debilitating almost at moments. Is it kind of a parody on mental health a little bit? I feel like I'm going all over the place right now. Don't worry, we'll get to specifics in a second. I feel like this book would really resonate with people who like Sylvia Plath, people who like Sally Rooney, people who like Atessa Moshfegh. I feel like are really going to like what's going on here with Shirley Jackson. It's about the psychological almost decline of or convolutedness of a young woman. I think she's in her 30s, so Eleanor's in her 30s. We start with her mother died. She spent basically her whole life caring for her mother. She was sheltered. She's innocent. She's still innocent. She's retained her innocence into her mid-30s because she's lived as a caregiver for her mother, but still in her mother's shadows. And her mother dies. She's already passed away at the beginning of this, and she had received a letter from this man, Dr. Montague, to go stay in Hill House to experience this paranormal activity. So she's like, oh my gosh, adventure. My life is finally beginning. Amazing. I'm gonna experience life. So yeah, sounds great. Let's go stay in this haunted freaking house and it's gonna be great. So she goes. The first paragraph of this book is really good. Okay, the first sentence completely sets up, if you go back and read the first little paragraph in the first sentence of this book, after you finish the book, you're like, I see you, Shirley Jackson, I see you. And my argument, okay, I'm not an academic, this is just my personal one-time read-through thoughts of this book. I think that the house is a metaphor for Eleanor's brain, okay? I think the house is actually Eleanor. There was a section in this book, there's a lot about, you know, the doors close on their own and people can't really find their way around and they feel like things are moving and things are not in the place that you think they're gonna be. And there's a section where Dr. Montague is like, oh yeah, the person that built this house wanted to design it to be like that, to be where things are slightly tilted, to be like a brain, essentially, he says. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so fucking interesting. It's like Eleanor's mental state. It's like her hallucinations, essentially. And she's a very unreliable character. She's not the narrator, but she's a very unreliable character. Let's read the first paragraph together, shall we? We shall. No live organism can continue for long to exist sanely under conditions of absolute reality. Even larks and katydids are supposed by some to dream. Hill House, not sane, stood by itself against its hills, holding darkness within. It had stood so for 80 years and might stand for 80 more. Within, walls continued upright, bricks met neatly, floors were firm, and doors were sensibly shut. Silence lay steadily against the wood and stone of Hill House, and whatever walked there walked alone. Eleanor, this book's got me all excited. Eleanor multiple times talks about her fear of loneliness and her fear of being alone, right? So she is alone we are all alone in our own brains. She is alone in her life. She is alone herself. So there's that. Whatever walks there walks alone, okay? My opinion and the vibe that I get is that, right, so Hill House is built kind of perfectly. Everything looks just fine on the outside. It's the inside that's a bit twisted and convoluted. Eleanor presents as a very respectable young lady, right? A respectable woman. She's innocent and pure and put together and all that, but that's not what's going on the inside. Very interesting. Again, like I said, there's lots of literary references in this. There's lots of references to, and I had to look this up because there were a few lines being repeated, and I'm like, okay, that's clearly significant if it's constantly being repeated. So I looked it up, and they're lines from Twelfth Night by Shakespeare. So, in delay there lies no plenty. The continuing of that quote is, youth is the stuff will not endure. It's completely impossible to remain in youth. Like you can't retain that purity. It's impossible. The other quote from Twelfth Night is, journeys end in lovers meeting. That was constantly repeated. And the full quote from Twelfth Night, Act 2, Scene 3, I looked this up, is, oh mistress mine, where are you roaming? Oh, stay in here, your true love's coming, that can sing both high and low, trip no further, pretty sweeting, journeys end in lovers meeting. I think that Eleanor has, as we all do, we have these romanticized notions of what life is going to be like. She certainly has romanticized notions of what breaking out of her sheltered upbringing to this exciting experience in this haunted house is going to be. We romanticize the notions of what life is going to be like, and it is not that way. Reality is not that way. We cannot exist sane in reality. It's just constant disappointment. That's basically what I get from those quotes. Journeys end in lovers meeting. The illusion is gone when you meet the actual reality. Also, Dr. Montague is reading Richardson's Pamela kind of throughout this book. So Pamela was referenced. That's a really interesting book. It's not a very good book in my opinion, but that's a very interesting book about this girl, young girl named Pamela, who lives in this house, and she has no money of her own, and the master of the house is a wealthy dude, and he's constantly the whole time trying to seduce her. It's about Pamela's virtue in retaining, being like, no, oh my gosh, oh no, like I can't, ooh, like I'm pure, I'm virtuous, I'm perfect. That's what Richardson's Pamela is about. I mean, based off everything that I said, I feel like the connections there are obvious. This book is very psychological. I don't think it's a horror at all. I mean, it is, but like, it's not scary. It's just like super I mean, our brains are scary. It's what's horrific about everything. There's also writing on the wall. Help, like, Eleanor, come home. It's being called back to her youth, right? She wants to go back to that innocence, go back to that purity, that childhood. Life is not what she thought that it would be. This experience is not what she thought that it would be. There's also references to Edgar Allan Poe's something of the March of the Red Death. Something of Edgar Allan Poe, and the colors of the rooms that all these characters are staying in, and Eleanor stays in the blue room. And the blue room is supposed to symbolize birth, innocence. Eleanor is representing that stage of life. Theodora is just slightly older than birth, right? She represents adolescence. Now this is something that I just kind of got vibes of while I was reading it, and this is one of the last things that I'll say, but I kept getting vibes of, like, you know that painting that Frida Kahlo, like that really famous painting of Frida Kahlo, where it's like two Frida Kahlos and they're holding hands, and it's like different versions of the same self. So it's like we all have different versions of ourself, and there's like a vein connecting both of those paintings. And one of them, she's wearing like a white dress and she's pure, and the other one she's wearing more colorful things. I kind of got the vibe that Theodora and Eleanor were supposed to like have that kind of idea going on, because there's also a scene where they end up sharing the blue room. They end up sharing Eleanor's room, and they hold hands across like the space where the twin beds are. Theodora then wears Eleanor's clothing at certain points, and certain things that Eleanor is thinking and doesn't say out loud, Theodora then says out loud. So it's almost like they're sisters, they're cousins, but they're kind of like the same person but different versions at different points in life. This book was very interesting. And the ending. I'm not gonna spoil the ending. Alrighty, so those are my thoughts on The Haunting of Hill House. I think I'm gonna have to make this video 2 parts because I just talk for forever about books. I just love books. Don't you just love books? Yes. Before I go, I wanted to leave you with a few quotes. Favorite quote, which I will leave you with. She had taken to wondering lately, during these swift counted years, what had been done with all those wasted summer days. How could she have spent them so wantonly? I am foolish, she told herself early every summer. I am very foolish. I am grown up now and know the values of things. Nothing is ever really wasted, she believed sensibly, even one's childhood. And then each year, one summer morning, the warm wind would come down the city street where she walked, and she would be touched with the little cold thought, I have let more time go by.